Boston society thing. They were called the Boston Brahmins. There was all this wealth, like in a whole abundance of money. Well, actually, it must have been, yeah, because it was before, maybe right after the war, the Great War. So there was all this abundance of wealth and money and all that stuff. And they were all like the rich and aspiring young people. And so her mother and father were part of that whole society.
Tasha Tudors.
Yeah. So anyway, so now it tells the story of the mother and father. The father was already married.
What was the father's name again?
Starling Burgess. So I have the whole write-up about, anyway, what they did is they were both already married. They had an affair, left their spouses, got married, had Tasha, but they had this wild lifestyle. The mother was an artist, and she was like this real bohemian kind of artist that lived in Greenwich Village. And so the father was just, I think he was bipolar, as it turned out. He had something, so he had like great mood swings and suicidal tendencies, they said, and he was an heavy drinker. So he was kind of like wild and out of control. So they end up sending Tasha Tudor to live with some other family who were a bunch of bohemians and had parties all the time, raised her. So she lived this wild kind of lifestyle growing up. What they did was they would have, back then they called them salons, parties. They'd have tons of people over and they'd put on parties. They'd like reenact a play. Like they'd have a play in the parlor. She got to participate in all that. But everyone was just kind of like wild and out of control. It was like the 1960s, but in the 1930s.
So that wild father
so
signed the journals?
He signed the journal. So what I wanted to know, because in the journal there's pictures of little girls in the garden. So I was all excited thinking, oh, he brought her to the garden, hoping one of these pictures was her. But it turned out when he came, she hadn't been born yet. So he came before he had her. But anyway, it's that kind of stuff that's fun to find out about. And then another one, like you could, like I found, like the great-great-grandfather, I found a letter that he wrote to one of the presidents at the time. I can't remember which president it was. I think it was John Quincy Adams, maybe, corresponding back and forth. But you can find like these little notes that people, like personal little notes that they write to each other. Then I found out, I'm telling you, there's no end to it, it's so fun. Then I found out about the famous great uncle Ned, who traveled from Sweden to Austria and Vienna, and it's this whole story about staying at these castles with the Marquis de something or other. It's all like the Napoleon's time period. So they talk a lot about Napoleon, and all those people of the king's courts were at this party, and she talks about all that stuff.
Oh, Mrs. Ernst?
No, this is Dr. Ernst's great aunt. And she makes fun of them and stuff. It's pretty funny. I think she says something about one of them had a hideous face or something. It's hilarious. But
And
then,
where are all these notes?
So then, that's a big fat journal of hers. That's a good read. And then, so then I go to look up about her. So throughout the journal, that journey she's on, it's a diary of a journey is what it is. She's talking about they stay in the farmer's house one night, but then in this castle with all the like kings and queens and dukes of the day are staying there at this big, it's like a masquerade ball like you see in the movies. And but throughout the whole thing, she has her infant daughter with her, and she's like this anxious ninny about this baby, as she was talking about this baby through the whole thing, and whether the baby's eating, and she got her a wet nurse, she didn't like the wet nurse, so it's all this like really personal stuff. And you can see where the family went through and tried to edit all that out, because they write omit, 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 and all they want is like the historical facts. They don't want her talking about nursing or anything. So anyway, the baby's name is Ida. So then I'm thinking to myself, I wonder whatever became of Ida, because she talks so much about her. So then I look it up. Well, Ida grew up and she never married. So then I Google Ida, and her name, and this is how it works. Her name comes up in a totally different realm. It comes up in a story about someone called Maria Mitchell. And Ida is one of Mariah Mitchell's best friends. So then I Googled Mariah Mitchell, and it turns out she's famous. There's a little Mariah Mitchell museum on Nantucket. It's her house where she grew up. And there's a book called Sweeper in the Sky. And she was the first ever woman astronomer. And she became famous for it. And a lot of astronomers came to her to learn from her.
And that was little Ida's best friend?
It turns out they were best friends, but then it turns out, like, you kind of get the sense they're suggesting that they might have been lovers, but neither of them married, and they say they would just adored each other and couldn't live without each other, and it's all this kind of funny stuff that goes on.
Where are all those journals?
So then,
where are those?
So Mariah Mitchell, there's been books written about her. She's
yeah, but where are the journals?
So that Lydia Russell, I retyped that. I got the journal. I copied it at Mass Historical Society. That's where I found it.
Oh yeah, you were sending me a lot of them. I still have them on my computer.
Yeah,
Where's that?
I gave you that to read. So I have that. I ended up transcribing it because it had all those notes from the family, and I wanted to just be able to read it without getting all followed up by those notes. But then Mariah Mitchell's, her story is really, really interesting. And I ended up reading that book. I started to read that book. It's online. And then I went to Google another name. So when Dr. Ernst and his wife Ellen died, they left the house at Manomet and the property to their nephew because they didn't have the children. And the nephew, his name is Roger, and his wife Ruth had been coming there since they were little, as well as Roger's sister. But then I come across a writing in the journals. It says, how sad, what a very sad day. Our darling niece has died. And her name is also Sarah Otis. So I put two and two together. At that time that she died, there's a raging epidemic of the Spanish flu. And if you go to Mount Auburn, you'll see there's a bunch of gravestones with deaths in the same 2-3 year period of young people. It's because hundreds of people were dying in Boston in the Spanish flu. Well, I'm pretty sure Ruth died of that. But anyway, so I Googled Ruth, and her name comes up linked to another person, just like Ida and Mariah. And her name is Louise Kidder Sparrow, and she's a famous American sculptor. Beautiful stuff. I just read a whole thing about her. She sculpted beautiful things in stone. And they were best friends, and it suggests that they were moved too. So it's really fun. But actually, I don't know about that with Louise, but she wrote a whole thing about how much she loved her friend. I think Louise ended up getting married, but there's, I don't know, it's really fascinating. The personal stuff you point out about people.
I know, that's what's interesting, and then that's what I was telling Michael, you just pick it up and hold it, like when we were holding even just the Farmer's Almanac and thinking about how someone held it and wrote in it all yet, because it has a blank page every month to take notes.
And that there was so much in their lives, so much happening.
Yeah, but way more to these people. That's why that's an interesting thing down there.
Now I'm dying to find out. So I took her for a walk, and there's a famous landscape designer that lives over here around the corner. I had taken a class with him once, and he was telling me a really good story about Clark's Island out there. He said, oh, we're going to Clark's Island today. It's the one day of the year it's open to the public. And I said, I wasn't. And he said, oh, I've just learned of this story. And they just found these letters, 50 letters. No, was it 50 letters? Over 50 years period, I forget. But anyway, it's the story of this husband and wife that were one of the first people to live on Clark's Island. He owned a big part of the island. Well, he had married her, and she was 15 years younger than him, and they had 3 or 4 children, and so she's still very young, and he dies, and he leaves her with absolutely nothing and no means to support these children, except for a house on the island, and that's the only thing she has. So a woman who lived, you know the beautiful big white Captain's Museum uptown with the little garden behind it?
Yeah.
You've been there? Well, I guess it was, if I understood him right, it was Emerson, the poet Emerson, Emerson's wife lived there, and I guess Emerson lived there too. But anyway, the wife took pity on Mrs. Watson, who lived on the island, and brought Mrs. Watson and her children over to live with her in that house. And then, when they decided to sell the house, she brought Mrs. Watson and the children with her to Concord to live. But the scandal is that something unspeakable happened between Mrs. Watson and Emerson, and she was banished back to the island again. And so, how all this comes out and is known is that an elderly couple passes away somewhere in San Francisco or somewhere in California. An elderly couple passes away, the family's cleaning out the house, they come across this big trunk, they don't even open it, they're about to throw it in the dumpster, and then somebody, it's been sitting by the dumpster like all day, and then somebody says, well, maybe we should look inside, and they look inside and it's full of all these letters, and it was apparently one of the children of this Mrs. Watson who received these letters. So it's letters, I think it was over a 50-year period, but it's all these letters written to these children telling this whole story. So they were good enough to know that these letters were important, and they sent it here. They contacted the Antiquarian Society here in Plymouth, and they were all shipped over. So now they're in the middle of cataloging all these letters. But my neighbor was telling me that story, and then my other neighbor said that the guy who lives in the last house right here is like a crazy historian nut. Like if you get him going, he won't stop. You could listen for hours and hours. And he's a history teacher somewhere, but he's a descendant. He's a Mayflower descendant, so he knows all the history of this whole area. I just read a really interesting little booklet about how Kingston was founded and developed, and that's online too. I can send you that.
Send me the links, and I'll read them, and I'll send them to
Michael.
Michael.
Email. I'll send you it, and I printed it out, and made it printed into a little booklet. But it's all about how this river right here, where I live, it's about how they sailed over from Plymouth and came up this little river, a couple little Indian camps along this river, and they just set up a camp and started trading. And then it built up. They started building little houses, and there's this whole story like how this lane here is the oldest lane in Plymouth. The Howlands are one of the first family. The Howlands had the oldest house, I guess.
Kingston, you mean?
This lane right here.
Yeah, you said Plymouth.
Yeah, and but at the time though, it was all considered Plymouth, and only over time did it divide. Like even as far as Bridgewater was Plymouth, and then they started separating and getting their own